Good day and welcome to the WANA webinar series. As you will notice, all participants have been muted. If you have a question to ask, please send your question into the Q&A panel located on the bottom right-hand side of your screen or by pressing the three-dot option along the bottom and selecting the Q&A panel. Your questions will be answered after the presentation. If you have any technical issues, please send a private chat to the host, the directions of which you can find in the chat window. Thank you for joining, and please welcome Ruth Osterman, Program Director of Genesis Club.
Thanks, Nikki. Hello, I'm Ruth Osterman, and with me today is Sarah Brown, who I hope many of you know. She is the Education and Young Adult Services Manager here at Genesis Club and also is on the faculty for Clubhouse Development. And also with me is Luke Knowles. Luke joined Genesis Club at 17 and a half. He's quite a bit older than that now. And he just left his full-time job of more than 4 years to return to school at Clark University to finish his bachelor's degree and then move into a master's program. So you'll be hearing from us today. So Genesis Club has been urgent about engaging 18 to 25-year-olds in our clubhouse for a long time. And we're gonna talk about some of those reasons why we think it's really important for 18 to 25-year-olds to be introduced to the intentional community and the services that a clubhouse has to offer right in those formative years. Things have changed a bit this year, and when Robbie and Kinga asked us to do this webinar, we were a little bit nervous about it because our young adults are experiencing the effects of the pandemic much in the way that, if you're reading the headlines, increased reports of anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation among young adults. The impact of the pandemic is being felt by 18 to 25-year-olds. And we didn't really think we had our heads wrapped around that yet. And I think we don't really still think we do, but we're going to share what we know. So can you put the first slide up, please? Maybe it's up and we can't see it. There we go. And the next one. So here's some of the reasons why we think it's urgent to engage 18 to 25-year-olds.
Yeah, so good morning, everybody. We wanted to start this presentation by really talking about the urgency behind engaging young adults. And when we say young adults, we're really saying 18 to 25-year-olds. So we pulled a few statistics that really speak to the experience of young adults living with a mental health condition, mental illness in our communities. And a few of the things that we found, and we've known this for a long time at Genesis Club, is that 50% of all serious mental illness begins by the age of 14. So just stop and think about that for a second, that 50% of all serious mental illness begins by 14. And that's the age where they're starting to experience the onset of symptoms. Might not be diagnosed yet, but they're beginning to experience those symptoms. And then 75% of all serious mental illness begins by age 24. So in those very formative years in the lives of the young people in our community, for those who are experiencing symptoms, that's happening while other things are also going on in their lives. The real devastating impact that's really tied to this statistic is that there is an average delay of 11 years between first onset of symptom and when the young adult or the young person begins to seek and receive treatments. And so we're kind of saying we need to close that gap and we need to start addressing those symptoms of mental illness in our young adults right away and not keep waiting or letting them flounder in the community.
And another statistic, which is perhaps a little more relevant to our world today, or indicative of our world today, is that 63% of 18 to 24-year-olds reported symptoms of anxiety or depression during the pandemic. So there is a rise, there is an increase in the need for the services, especially relevant services like Clubhouse, directly because of the pandemic and specifically because in this age group. The rates of mood disorders and suicide-related outcomes have also increased significantly among adolescents and young adults over the last decade. It's almost like we all know that, but to put those numbers to it reveals the urgency of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide. So, and then there's more. So, what we've learned, and I would say we're not an expert on this, but why we have to engage our 18 to 25-year-olds slightly differently is because the prefrontal cortex in the brain is still developing during these years. And so the prefrontal cortex is where executive function is, decision-making, moderating social behavior, regulating impulsivity, better understanding of risk. And so 18-year-olds don't really have the same brain functioning that a 26 or a 30-year-old has in making decisions about their lives. But they don't have the life experience behind it either, and we'll talk about that. One really important thing that we think about all the time is this is the age of identity formation. So back to Erik Erikson's stages of development. Between the ages of 18 to 25 is when you're forming your identity of yourself. I'm a skilled college student. I'm a good employee. I show up on time. And many of our older members during those years were spending years trying to get good treatment for their illness. So cycles of hospitalizations, psychiatrists, therapists. The identity many of our members who are older were forming was that of a patient with an illness. And they didn't have a good clubhouse to go to maybe, but we think this generation needs to form their identity around employment and education and quality of life and those kinds of things, and also managing a mental illness. And we think that the clubhouse is the only service in town that really allows them to do that.
There's also, for young adults, the realities of emerging adulthood, which, by the way, we've learned through research that, there are societal expectations for young adults to meet certain milestones in their lives. So, for example, there's this expectation that by the time you're 18, you've graduated high school, you're preparing for college, or you're moving out of your parents' house. By the age of 21, 22, you're finishing college and you're entering romantic relationships, or moving into marriage and having children. Those expectations are also sort of they're different for each generation of young adults, and they're sort of moving back a little bit. The thing that we need to understand for 18 to 25-year-olds is that these expectations are in place for them, while at the same time they have very little, if any, life experience to draw back on and to say, oh, I'm going to draw on this experience to make, X, Y, and Z decision. Whereas when we think about some of our older members, they can refer back to their first experience in college or their first job, and they're able to use those experiences in their decision making, which our young adults don't yet have.
Genesis Club, and we believe that the urgency of young adults in Clubhouse comes from the idea that early intervention leads to better lifelong outcomes. And not to go in depth, but 15 years ago when I started as a member, what if I know all the growth I've done since then, having this job that I never thought I'd have, going back to school, all those supports, the Clubhouse has been there right along. If I had joined at 25 or if I had joined at 30, how different would my life be? But I didn't. I joined right at 18, 17 and a half. And that's why there is an urgency of earlier intervention with young adults in the Clubhouse.
Next slide, please. So why the Clubhouse now when you're 18, 19, 20 years old? And here's what we've kind of learned over our years of being urgent. 18 to 25-year-olds want what every other friend and person in their peer group wants, which is to figure out employment and education. They have goals of employment and education, not quite sure in what direction they're going to go. The Clubhouse is a service that those are foundational services. So when we talk to young adults and we go out and talk to people who refer young adults to us, we talk mostly about being a service that provides supported employment and supported education. And that is really the thing that 18 to 25-year-olds want and the reason that they'll join. They're not that interested in medication and therapy and other mental health services. That's why maybe there's such a gap, because those are not appealing services for young adults, but continuing with their education and employment are. And so that's the reason that young adults are going to join. There's a lot of other reasons that they're going to stay, but those are the upfront services for 18 to 25-year-olds.
Right. And we've also learned that we need to have an urgency and immediacy behind hearing the goals of our young adults. So as Ruth was mentioning a little bit earlier on about the prefrontal cortex and the development that's happening in the 18 to 25 stage of life, young adults are very quick to make decisions. They want to see things happen very quickly. They don't want to keep waiting. And so if we take too long to address the goals of young adults, they're going to walk right out the door. So really what we say is you have to ask about their goals and you have to talk about employment and education at the door. And what at the door means is at that very first phone call, when you get a referral for a young adult, hello, what are your goals? Have you thought about employment and education? What are you thinking about those things? It's at their very first tour. I feel like we have to be flexible in the Clubhouse world to change some of those systems that we use with all of our members that are not going to be effective with our young adult members. And then the second part to that is we also have to have urgency to support young adults to take steps to work on those goals. So first, we're letting them know we hear you right away, we're curious right away about your goals. And secondly, we're going to support you to, making the decisions and taking the steps into reaching some of those goals. And these two are the reason, or a couple of the reasons why young adults tend to stay at the Clubhouse, is because we're addressing those goals right away. We also learned that reach out is extremely important for our young adults, and a variety of ways of reaching out. Our young adults are not annoyed by multiple text messages in the same day, or a text message and a social media outreach in the same day, because their peers are doing that. They're already doing that with each other. And so reach out is extremely important.
The piece that, along with reach out, along with constant outreach, it's not just the first call, as Sarah said, it's the subsequent calls and checking in with our young adults, or texts or whatever, is that there needs to be a structure to hear the young adult voice. And I remember this story from my own life when I had just joined the Clubhouse, and I actually joined with someone who I had been in adolescent programs with. And I remember clear as day on one of our first days when there was a policy meeting going on, and the current director came in and said, "You're coming to the policy meeting, right?" And she was just totally floored that A, a young person, B, a member, was asked to be a part of the decision-making process. And it was so exciting and so motivating for both of us. But that's how Clubhouse works. Everybody has that role, and they're wanted, needed, and expected. Right. So there has to be a structure to hear the young adult voice and respond to their needs.
Right, and I think at Genesis Club, we've learned that young adults are not just going to walk through our doors. So that's the significance of the reach out and the structure, as well as we need to go out there and find them and invite them into this structure or forum that we're offering. For us, we use the Young Adult Outreach Committee that meets once a week, and that's sort of where we're bringing, programmatic ideas, changes for the Young Adult Initiative. Where do young adults see our programs going? But beyond that, that's where we get sort of the minority of the voices. But reach out is where we talk to every single young adult about, hey, look, here's what we're thinking. Putting together this presentation, we did a ton of reach out to confirm, are we saying the right things? Are these the things that, the community needs to hear about young adults? So particularly important.
So a group from Headway Clubhouse in Missouri spent a week with us on engaging young adults in the Clubhouse training. And when we did a follow-up call with them, we were amazed at how well they were doing engaging young adults. And so we captured that a bit on video to hear their experience and the kinds of things they changed.
Here at Headway, we've tried to capture the interest of young adults by making it a priority to connect with people, right away from the tour when they come in. We're trying to connect with what they're looking for in the Clubhouse, and trying to communicate that we're able to provide that. Then in the orientation, we've also been you know, making sure that that message comes across. And so right from the get-go, we want the new young adults that are coming in to see that they could see themselves, how they could be a part of the clubhouse.
When I joined, what really brought me in, I heard about the transitional employment programs. That might not be what gets everyone in, but I know a lot of people would have been helped out by a lot of the other things that also kept me here coming, like the just community. Everyone here is really nice, really welcoming. I made a couple good friends on my first day here.
I think that something that we've really tried to emphasize is that community aspect, that, like Austin said, that's what people seem to be connecting with, and making our environment a place where it's not young adults entering into some other world, it's them seeing their world within the clubhouse. It took a little bit of just sort of relaxing some of the rigidness maybe in what we are, having a very specific tour that we took everybody on, or a very specific like orientation or things we expected out of the members in orientation, to where giving them that ability to connect with the young adults that we have here. And we've had great outreach from our young adults in connecting with those new members that are coming in. And I think that that's really, all the success really is owed to them making those connections.
I know it's also was really nice hearing, like, when I came here, that my input, my help was wanted and welcomed. Yeah. And that definitely being almost pushed to help out, to give what advice that I have and my experience.
That's something that we really learned from the training, was to have that forum for young adults to have their voice, and and have it be a unique place. We created a young adults committee or meeting that we're getting a lot of our guidance on what to do with our in our meetings and our how we welcome people moving forward, presenting to other referral sources, and getting the word out there that the clubhouse exists, and that it's a place where people that are in that 18 to 25 year range could come to meet their goals.
And it's also, a lot of times I've noticed, younger people do end up getting almost silenced by a lot of other groups everywhere. And so helping them be assured that they're wanted and welcomed wherever they are is really helpful.
One of the biggest differences with training has to do with more of the attitude and the sort of knowing to keep that stuff, like the employment and education, knowing to keep that in the forefront, knowing to ask about that. I think that a lot of the young adults that have come in have the community seems to be really what they're in search of. And they have those employment and education goals. Some of them may or may not want our help with that right now, but they definitely want the community, that something to be part of, someplace to call their own.
They still want the transitional employment, the schooling, and help with all that.
And so knowing that that's always going to be there and available for people when they want it.
I think that most people would come here looking for the amazing community that we have. Because I know, coming out of the pandemic, with everything A lot of people still like to go and hang out at places. I'm not personally. I usually stayed inside all the time. I sat inside in my room on my computer talking to people on the internet instead of out in person. But that's what most people do still, anyways. So with the pandemic still shutting everything down, a lot of people felt like super spread apart, even though they have the internet at their fingertips and can connect. They still felt like they needed to see everyone in person.
You know, really across all age groups, we've had a really higher than our usual retention rate for people that are coming from tours to orientation to, you know, becoming members. That I think that there's a lot of people, while like during the pandemic, while we weren't available, you know, that need like really got more intense and immediate. And that's counts for the young adults and you know, even the older adults. So we've been open since May, and we've had I know we've had 5 since the training, and I think I looked, it was like 28% or something like that of our total number of members that we've added have been young adults too.
Wow.
So
I only found out about Headway through my case manager with Compass, and she just said one thing about Headway. Like, she told me about it, and I instantly just knew that that's what I've been looking for. Well, I think really getting the word out there more would help a lot.
the next challenge is getting our
We need to get the
name
word out there
even wider out there. And
for sure. I never would have heard about this place if it weren't for my case manager.
Thanks, Tom and Austin. We're thrilled that Austin found the Clubhouse, and 28% of their referrals since May have been for young adults. We've seen an uptick in referrals to Genesis Club for potential members 18 to 25-year-olds. So it really speaks to the need out there, and we're seeing it in headlines, we're hearing it from our young adults, and we're seeing it in our referrals as well. So young adults join for employment and education. They stay for the wonderful community and for friends, but there are some other benefits that only Clubhouses can uniquely offer young adults in the service system. The intergenerational model. So young adults are looking for peers. They're looking for friends. They're looking for people 18 to 25-year-old, but right away, they also are appreciating that there are people of all ages in the Clubhouse, and they're befriending people of all ages, and they're, asking for advice or maybe giving advice on tech stuff and other stuff to older people. The intergenerational component is really appealing to young adults, and in almost all the other services we know that cater to transition age or young adults, it's a cutoff at 25 or 26-year-olds, sometimes 30.
We also really strongly believe and say that, again, the Clubhouse is the only place that's uniquely and urgently addressing the 18 to 25-year-old needs. And when we say that, we mean more than just employment and education. We're also talking about all of the social determinants of health, right? We're talking about housing, friendships, the employment, the education, everything else that comes to leading a fulfilling and healthy lifestyle. The Clubhouse is addressing those in a very holistic way. We've also, talking amongst each other, we think that other programs out there believe, and they are also addressing urgent needs, but we tend to say that those urgent needs tend to be system defined, right? Whereas we're addressing the urgent needs as identified by the 18 to 25-year-old, where other programs are urgently meeting the clinical needs, the therapy, the medication management, the group home living situations. All of those things might be important to the long-term recovery of young adults, but we're kind of saying if young adults are coming in here asking for what their peers are saying, which is employment and education and wellness, then that's what we want to offer right away to young adults. And we think that Clubhouses do, and is the only place that does it that way.
Ruth mentioned the cutoff from when a lot of services say, okay, you're not a young adult, so you need to go to a different program. And the beauty of having a clubhouse, which is if you want to come back, you can come back as many times as you want, as old as you want. It reminds me of a story when I was working as an assistant manager at a respite, and we had this young man who was 18 years old, and it took the first few weeks for us to really get to know each other, to really open up, to know what his goals were, for him to communicate his goals. And then we were just starting to he was applying to jobs, and we were working on a resume. We did all this great work. And suddenly my division director says, I'm sorry, Luke, but his time in the contract is up. He needs to move to ACCS. I never even knew if he got those jobs that we were practicing interviews for. And I never had that experience, because when I joined at 17 and a half, I could keep coming back, and I'm 33 now, and I still come back. So the beauty of Clubhouse is that, not that you're a member for life, because I don't think anyone wants to hear that. I don't really even want to hear that, and I love Clubhouse. It's the idea that you can always come back and get your needs met. That's the beauty of it.
So next slide, please. So we want to talk about the impact of the pandemic, and we are mired in listening to our young adults right now and sort of understanding what that is. When Genesis Club had to close its building in March of 2020, within the first few months, our young adults were among the most resilient of our members, staying home on the computer. They knew how to FaceTime. They were teaching us Zoom and Google Docs, and really the impact was quite minimal right away, when many of us were kind of scared to death and the anxiety was high. But as the summer went on and then fall, the spread was high, it was prolonged, we were less able to reach a lot of our young adults. They started to disengage. And then as the winter went and the holidays, the young adults who were staying engaged were talking more about feeling lonely and isolated. And we're kind of in a really bad space. That's not unusual after winters in New England. So, but it combined with really being isolated for all this time, we knew something was changing, and we weren't really sure what was changing, and young adults didn't have language for it. We, Sarah and I particularly, were reading, starting to read the headlines of the impact for 18 to 25-year-olds, increased feelings of anxiety and depression, remote school, isolation. And so in one of our weekly young adult committee meetings in March, we thought we'd bring in an article that to us was particularly interesting, and said, here's what the newspapers are saying. Are these feelings that you guys are having?
Right. So I remember that meeting and maybe a series of meetings after that pretty vividly, because even though we had already identified some things up, our young adults aren't really around, they're not being very vocal, we just kept sort of doing business as usual. We'll keep doing the outreach. We'll keep doing, the things that we know already or have worked, but they weren't very effective at this point. And so I remember that meeting when we brought the first headlines, and they were talking about the increased anxiety and depression, the loneliness, the increase in substance use for the 18 to 25-year-olds. And the first few moments, Ruth and I kind of looked at each other, because young adults just kept their head down. So, we weren't sure, did we do the right thing, and we were just asking, do you, the 5 young adults in the room with us, do you relate to these sentiments? Are they true in your life? And it took a little while, but after the first young adult kind of picked up their head and said, that's exactly what I'm feeling. I've been feeling so lonely, so isolated. I've just been immersed in my video games. My mom doesn't understand, or my grandparents. All of a sudden, all the other young adults in the room started looking at each other and saying to each other, yeah, that's me too. I was supposed to have graduated college last year and I didn't even get to do that. Or I was supposed to have started a TE with Genesis Club. And then on my first day of work, literally, the pandemic started for one of our young adults. And so that experience for us was very eye-opening. That's when we realized, wow, we need to stop and listen to our young adults and hear what they have to say.
So what we started to understand, and we're still listening and understanding, is that a year of isolation when you are 20 or 22 or 18 is a lifetime. The impact is much stronger than a year of isolation for somebody who is much older than that. We invited a couple of young adults to join us today, and they weren't into doing the whole webinar, but we did get a video clip of Chris and Hayley, a couple of Genesis Club members, who are going to try to convey some of the feelings.
One of the main things we do in the Young Adult Committee, we talk about a lot of like really big, like significant, important topics to us, which is nice because it really feels like really good to get it off our chests. Because it's a lot to handle. We're young people.
We talk about our goals. We talk about our feelings. We talk about what we want to do in life and how we want to achieve our goals as well, and encourage each other.
We feel kind of like we're like surviving instead of really thriving. We have some like specific anxieties about like just like general anxiety about the whole pandemic part, but also about re-engaging with school and jobs. We're having a hard time finding it important because we're worried about going back into like pandemic lockdown, which is an issue for us.
With me, I'm like anxious about school, where my life is going, and like what steps I want to take, and sometimes I'm like, where do I even start? And I come to Genesis to look for help and seek for help, and guidance.
Yeah, I agree. Guidance was a big thing for me coming here, because there's not a whole ton of people out there to really be able to talk about this kind of stuff with.
Yeah, and same with looking for a job as well.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, they help me like look for a job like with TEs and other stuff, like if I'm looking for a job myself rather than a supportive one too.
So like I thought it was cool coming into Genesis Club that even if we didn't want help finding a job, like if we found a job, they would still have that support for us, which I don't think I've ever heard of anyone else doing that. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's not like you're being forced to do something. Like the staff are not forcing you to rush into it. It's more like
meet us where we're at in our journey to wherever we want to be going. Like I came in having no sort of direction, and now I kind of have like a little baby plan going forward. So that's really cool. That's something that they help us with. So something that's really important to the young adults that we have talked to is the difference between having sympathy from older than 25s versus having empathy from them. And so something that we've been talking about is like, we don't need your sympathy, we would rather have your empathy. And so some examples that we've like talked about with that, at least for us, have been, we would rather have sympathy is more like sharing your feelings, such as like, I know how you feel because I experienced this, versus empathy is we want you to understand our feelings, but not necessarily have to share them. So sentences that would be helpful would be more along the lines of, it must be challenging to deal with this. What can I do to help? Or I'm so sorry that happened, rather than like, I felt this way, so here's how you should feel. And then some other things we've been talking about is like all the changes we want to see. And there's a couple of different ones.
Yeah, like some of the things we were thinking of like is obviously some diversity. How do we see it that we can increase it throughout the clubhouse? More young adults in the clubhouse. This might be the only form of social interaction that they have during any given day.
Yeah.
So like the reason why we want more young adults is that we need more people our age to relate to. Not saying that older adults are like we don't relate to them. It's modern times basically. And it's just harder to cope with some relating to someone's past than someone's present. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And to touch on what you said, like the difference between it being young adults versus over 25s is that for the most part, older than 25s have like already been in the real world like for a bit longer, so they have like more of a foundation set up. Like they might have a home or somewhere out of their house to live, like a set job that they didn't lose during COVID, set family, set friends, stuff like that. It's like, I feel like it's a lot more solidified than young adults really have, because I feel like we're more just entering into the like bigger world. And so, I don't know, I feel like we feel a bit alone and a bit like we're not entirely sure what to do. But at least for me, and I'm sure for you too, I definitely think we're willing to like put in the work to make the changes we want to see, just with maybe some guidance from some of the over 25s.
Yeah.
All right, looks like the video might be coming in a little too choppy. I apologize for that. Would you guys be able to just talk about their subjects a bit?
Sure. It certainly is not as compelling as hearing them say themselves, and that's unfortunate, because they were really quite profound, I guess, in really expressing the feelings that they were having coming out of the pandemic. And I think, Sarah, you can kind of recount a lot of it, but one of the general points is they still were thinking about employment and education, but it was really hard for them to, make the application of college or decide on where they wanted to go, because what's the point? We're in a pandemic. We're going to have to lock down again. What if this happens? So they were really, the employment and education goals are there, but the immediacy didn't seem relevant in a world that was going to be shut down again anyway.
Right, and I think there was this huge sentiment where young adults for a long time even felt guilty about saying out loud that I'm isolated, I don't want to do Zoom anymore, I'm dying to see people face to face, because there was this expectation that you're young, you can figure out Zoom, you have your video games, you have your online communities. And so that, I think what Chris and Hayley conveyed really well that we could never, was that they really wanted to convey those feelings to older than 25s, as Hayley says it in the video, without making them feel bad. What they wanted the recipient to kind of say was not, oh, I'm in this pandemic too, I totally relate to that and this is how it feels for me. They want the older than 25s to say, wow, that must be really difficult. I had never heard anybody say that before. How can I help? How can we be available? So that sentiment came through very strongly.
And I think the feeling that older than 25s, as Hayley and Chris say, sharing a particular experience when they were 18 to 25 to be sympathetic to the experience wasn't helpful. Mm-hmm. This is a unique period of time with a unique set of circumstances and hitting them very uniquely. And while they enjoy and like talking with older members, they really, really don't feel like those of us over 25 can understand I don't know, how large the impact is.
Right. And it's interesting that in their conversation with each other, they talk so much about their fears and anxieties with employment and education, but they never stop talking about employment and education. And towards the end of the video, they were kind of saying, so I kept coming back to Genesis Club because, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but it's because we were listening to them, and I think we were offering a space where they were comfortable to say those feelings out loud. And then Hayley says,
and providing guidance.
And providing guidance. They said that a lot. And so then Hayley says, now I have a baby plan going for me, right? And Chris expresses as well that he's taken some steps back into education, into building his career. So and I just kind of want to highlight too that this is true for the young adults who have been engaging in the committee and who have been engaging with us through outreach, but we don't know and we don't think that it's true for the young adults that are entirely disconnected, because where else is offering a forum and a space and an opportunity for those fears to be heard while also addressing the scary needs of employment and education for young adults.
And I think the other major point that they make is there's a lot going on in the world: the pandemic, the racial reckoning, climate change. And they're very frustrated that things change so slow. And again, that relates back to some of the prefrontal cortex and really wanting change. And so they're frustrated with themselves, they're frustrated with the world, they're frustrated with Genesis Club, that we need to have more diversity, we need to bring the heat of the climate down, but nothing really changes. We talk. So they did make a commitment in the video to actually be part of the change as they understand how that is.
Right.
So I hope we conveyed them their sentiments well. We certainly can't the way that they do. Can you put the next slide up, Nikki? So opening their feelings has really happened most profoundly probably in the last couple of months. And so what we've learned to do flexibly is stop talking and listen, validate, and go with what our young adult ideas are, because they want to do something. So in the last few young adult committee meetings, they've been generating ideas really rapidly, and they're all wonderful, and we're working with them, and we'll see where it goes. So Slack and Discord, we had a young adult channel on Slack. That's an instant messaging platform that through the pandemic we could be talking with each other, but it wasn't much used, and young adults wanted to switch to Discord, which Sarah and I hadn't heard about, but that Discord is, now we have a lot of young adults, and they're welcoming Sarah and I into that channel, talking to each other, throughout the day, at night, on weekends. So Discord has become a way that our young adults are talking to each other. And because we've allowed the voice to open up about the fears and anxieties and the do with the pandemic, they're talking a lot about that kind of stuff too. In our weekly young adult committees, we've decided to focus outreach on people we're really concerned about. And, so if they don't respond to the text, what do we do next? And who wants to get involved? And what do we do next? And to the young adults in our referral system, because we have a lot of them and they're not always responding back. And we want to make sure that young adults in our city who are experiencing these same fears and anxieties have the opportunity, and this is our young adults talking, to join the group talking about it here and knowing they're not alone. Young adults started planning a weekly social on Friday afternoons just for an hour to have an in-person time to get together. They started a YouTube channel, which is 2 or 3 weeks old now, and are filming episodes to the YouTube channel. And what has happened through the work being more regular and more relevant for young adults is while they have found safe spaces in our work units, that while they're doing that work, they can really start to talk about their feelings of what's the point and work that through and think that through with other people.
And I just want to underscore too that when we say they're doing the YouTube channel, they're on Discord, we're really saying we are, right? Because, and if you had heard Chris and Hayley, they talk about the guidance and the direction that they get so much from our community, and we're owning these platforms with them. Yeah. And
it's a Genesis Club YouTube.
They're bringing the work into the unit, and we're helping them do that, because really they could take it and run with it, but we want them to, embed that work into our unit systems. We want it to be a partnership in the clubhouse.
So the next slide, this week's work is our young adults in partnership with us created a flyer. And this flyer is going to be mailed out to all of our active young adults and young adults who were active throughout last year. But also our young adults want to place them at different places around our city so that young adults in our community who are experiencing mental health challenges can know that this is an opportunity at Genesis Club. So that's the work we're working on this week. Next slide.
So, and the last point on the previous slide was I included the words, what's the point? And I know this from my own experience with Genesis, and I know it from talking with the current young adults, the next generation of young adults, that there's a difference between what the Clubhouse provides and what other services provide. And the way I liken that is that for me, and I've been in clinical services since the age of 12, and I started Genesis at roughly 18. But to me, all the clinical services is the how to recover from a serious mental illness. And Genesis Club, or the Clubhouse model, has always been my what's the point? The answer to that question, what is the point? Because I always wondered, well, if I'm just going to be a patient all my life, why would I work so hard to overcome the challenges that I face, that I still face? Why would I bother? What is the point? And Genesis was always that voice saying, no, have a real job, have real relationships, have your own life, separate from being a patient. So I'm always intrigued by that idea. And I've spoken with many current young adults who say the same thing, that Genesis is the place that says, no, you can have those real experiences in your life, and you're not just a patient. So it's the difference between the how to recover and the why should I bother. And for me, Clubhouse has always been the why should I, and what's the point, the answer to that question. I think young adults value that. They can benefit from all the other services just like I did, but unless they have a what's the point and an answer to that, and that's what they get from Clubhouse. That's what I get from Clubhouse.
So thank you. That's our presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Now for the video, we are working to see if we can get a link. If not, it will for sure be added to the recording for everyone to view. It's a great video for everyone to watch. So we will jump into Q&A session at this time. For those that have a question they would like to ask, please submit your question in the Q&A panel located in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, or by pressing the three-dot option along the bottom and selecting the Q&A panel. Our first question for today: is there a specific unit for young adults, or are they just integrated into other units?
Good question. So I'll start with that one, and you can add on. Young adults can join any unit that they want to join at Genesis Club. And when we first started really urgently focusing on this, we were building out our new building, so it was a long time ago. And we really thought young adults would want to be in the same unit, so we were designing the cafe to kind of be the place where young adults would come, and that would be that unit. But as we were building it, young adults wanted to cook in the kitchen, and they wanted to help with the grants in the training and development unit, and they wanted to do tours in the membership unit. So young adults can join all units. The weekly young adult committee really is kind of focused around what's the work this week to advance our young adult initiative, which could be letting more young adults in our community know about us, or building out programming that meets young adult current needs. So that's decided in the young adult committee, and the work is taken out to units. We do have our young adult initiative grounded in the career development unit, which is where Sarah works. That's where the agenda for the committee is developed. The minutes are distributed. We oversee the work to make sure. And it made sense to be in the career development unit because of the interest in employment and education. And that seems to work well.
Right. I think you hit all the big points. That's it.
If I may just add that what unit you have the majority of young adults in has changed over the 15 years that I've been here. So it's intriguing to see what the young adults are interested in. When I joined training development 15 years ago as a young adult, there were not as many as in other units of the Clubhouse, I think it's safe to say. But over time, the interests of the young adult have changed. I think that just goes with the individual culture we have currently. Because right now, I'm so excited because we've got over 50% of the active young adults in training and development.
And I would say that's the interest of the young adults changing. It is also about the staff in those units and the engagement that goes on, because we've seen that as different staff have come in and have left. So there's that piece of it too.
Wonderful, great answers. Your answers actually answered my second question. So we're going to jump to, have you done any outreach into the foster care system to identify young adults aging out and struggling with mental illness and or homelessness?
That one's
You want me to
hard.
take it?
Yeah.
We have, and mixed with mixed results. It's hard for you because we did it actually a while ago, and it was at the lead of our young adults. So at that time, we had a young adult very active in our committee who had come from the foster care system and had actually just aged out. And she connected us with the case managers in a staff meeting. And we went in and presented the clubhouse to the DCF staff with this young adult. And she had been with us, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. The case managers were just astounded at who she had become and that she was actually in school and pursuing goals. And we've tried to foster that relationship, but so I will say yes with mixed results.
Okay. Our next question, do you do anything special for young adults regarding social recreational activities?
Yes. So I think I can take that one. So with a little bit of a history of with our young adults regarding socials, I think for Genesis Club, socials for our young adults were never really a huge guiding factor. Of course, they wanted social activities, but they really weren't calling for them like every week or every month or anything like that. When we did pre-pandemic, when we planned socials, young adults were all about the planning phase and figuring out what we're going to eat and where we're going to go, what we're going to do. And then, the day would come along for the social, and we really didn't see very many young adults. And we assume that it's because young adults find other things to do. They know how to be social. It's kind of easy for them in some ways. But then during the pandemic, socials became more important than they ever were, at least at our clubhouse, where young adults were saying, we need the face-to-face interaction. This was particularly around the time where we had just begun to reopen, so we weren't at full capacity. You had to sign up in advance to come in. And so we started a weekly social at that time, every Friday from 3 to 4. Actually, our very first one was from 8 to 9. We had a breakfast coffee social, and about 10 young adults came. And then the next one was a 3 to 4, sort of just playing cards and connecting. And so in the progression of our socials, I think we've been using them as young adults have been wanting and needing them. It's no longer just this regular, we're going to have it one way or the other. It's more, where are the young adults at in terms of socials? What do they want or not want?
It's a topic on our weekly young adult committee agenda every week. Or do we want to plan a social this week? Or do we want to think about a social in the next couple of weeks? And sometimes they take a break, but they are planning one right now to go to the Science Museum in a couple of weeks, and they're doing some outreach around that.
All right. Our next question, is there a role for Clubhouse members who have moved on and are no longer active members at the Clubhouse to play in the lives on the young, or in the lives on the new young adults?
You want to take that one, Luke?
Yeah, and I think I can answer it pretty well. So I'm not a young adult anymore. I haven't been for a while, technically, but I'm here speaking about it. I really caution people on that because I understand there's quite an urge, and I have it myself. The 4 years I spent working in residential care were with the young adults, and I love working with the young adults. It's so fun, the energy. But I just caution that because, and a lot of what Hayley and Chris's video spoke to was that, I think young adults like the guidance, but they don't like the piece of older adults trying to come in and either try to be young adults themselves again, or B, try to tell young adults how to run their stuff. So we've had experience with that over the years, different experiences back when I was a young adult and now, where I just caution against that. I think it's a great motive, but I check myself too. I say, I don't know if my input is necessarily going to be helpful to them. And I also know that the club is about volition. The clubhouse model is about learning to be independent. It's not like the other models where, here, I'm going to give you everything you need to be better. You have to have some of that independence. That's essential. That's part of the clubhouse model. So I'm here, I'm speaking, I'm 33, and I know about these things, but I really do try to restrain myself in general from putting myself too much onto them. And I think as a result, they like me, we're friends, but I don't try to be a young adult and I don't try to run their committee.
And just want to add on that specifically reflecting back to when we were young adults is so unhelpful to young adults. And they just feel like, Chris talks about it as, these are modern times, and you're 27 and you're not modern anymore. So thinking about that. Sarah and I were talking earlier about why we have to continually pay so much attention to 18 and to 25-year-olds. And really it's because they grow up really quickly.
They change
so
from year to year.
And the interests change so quickly. So what was interesting to an 18-year-old 3 years ago isn't interesting to an 18-year-old right now. And I don't know if I'm saying that well. One of the examples is Discord. So for us, right, Slack last year was sort of let's all be on Slack. And then, people grow up and a new group comes in and everybody's on Discord and we have to be on Discord. So I think the reflecting back is not helpful.
Right.
Wonderful. All right, this is going to be our last question for today. Why do you think the clubhouse needs young adults?
We can all take that. Anybody want to start?
Sure, I'll kick that off. So I think I will preface this by saying I think young adults have needed the clubhouse during all of our existence. And we've talked about all the reasons why. But young adults bring a lot of unique experiences that we don't necessarily get from older than 25-year-olds. Young adults bring the skills and talents from their generation. Young adults bring an enthusiasm that sometimes really helps pick up our vibe at the clubhouse, if you will. So I think that we need young adults in order to stay fresh and in order to not to continue to be clubhouse programs that are appealing and attractive to young adults in our communities.
I would say, in addition to that, that's very true, is that part of this is that when someone who's already internalized, and actually I'll just speak for myself, so it's not anyone other than me. Even at the age of 18, I had started to internalize what the world was saying at that time, and I think it still says it to an extent. It's a little better, that you're a mental health patient. You'll be lucky if you have a subsidized apartment. You live on disability all your life. Don't bother getting a job. Don't bother going to school, because I'm hyperbolizing a little bit, but you're going to either die homeless or in a hospital at the age of 40 anyway. That was real. That was my experience. I don't know if it's anybody else's, but that was mine. And so the club needs young adults as much as the young adults need the club, because it's the rejection of that idea. And if you can get to people before they've had 10 to 20 years of internalizing that, you have a better chance not only of changing their lives, but of changing the world in general. Because if there are enough young adults that don't buy that message when it's given to them, and don't buy it over and over and over again, and start to think that's real, because it's not real. I had a job after all the doctors in the world, including my parents who love me, said, please don't work, it's not worth your effort. And I proved it all wrong. So we need to have young adults, and they need to have us, because of that factor, that we're changing that message. And it's a lot harder to tell someone who's already heard it for 10 years as opposed to someone who has maybe not heard it as much.
So I would say all of that, and young adults bring a hopefulness and an energy to the clubhouse that the clubhouse needs. They're confident, they're a little brash, they're not afraid to take those risks. I think sometimes we're more afraid for them that they're going to take the wrong risk, but they want to work, they want to go back to school. They really push us at Genesis Club to provide those employment and education opportunities in a way that our older members are reticent for all the reasons that we've kind of laid out. But young adults aren't. So they really bring energy and hope to the club.
Wonderful. We do have some comments. We do have someone that said, well done to all of you. Thanks for all your information. Shumisti Clubhouse in Dublin. I probably said that wrong. But it looks like there's a lot of clubhouses that can relate, especially for the young adult community. So that would be our ending for today. Everyone, anything you guys still wanted to say? I didn't want to cut you out. No? All right, wonderful.
No.
Very powerful. All right. So if we have not answered your question, please send an email to the WANA webinar at fountainhouse.org. The presentation and the videos for today will be sent directly to everyone in attendance, and the recording will be made available next week. There will be a survey on the screen once the event ends. Please take a moment to fill it out and give us any of your feedback. Thank you for coming to the webinar, and please be on the lookout for announcements regarding our future webinars.